to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. As you can see behind me, of course, my colleagues are working really hard to tell you the stories with regard to the budget 2019. Certainly we are preparing for tomorrow's newspapers as well. But joining here with me are three of my colleagues to talk about the budget and you, and certainly why it matters. We have Chong Wei Hong, our opinion editor. We have Ravi Velur, our associate editor, as well as Salma Halik, senior health correspondent. Thank you guys for being here. And of course, earlier on, Minister Heng Swee Keat has delivered his close to 3-hour speech, right, on the budget for this year. Maybe to start things off, could we have Wei Hong to share with us what stood out for you in the budget?
Sure. Hi, good evening, and thanks for being with us here this evening. This is basically the first budget that's being steered by the 4G group of leaders, and it will definitely be picked apart for what it might say about the priorities of this new generation of leaders. And essentially, one, we see a broadening and a deepening of social safety nets, not unexpected. The workfare income supplement ceiling went up. The CHESS subsidies now go out to everybody, regardless of income. Public assistance rates also went up to the relief, I think, of many of our most vulnerable elderly. Older workers get more support. Social development now will take up about 46% of the budget, compared to 30% for security and diplomacy. What I liked also, and what I'm quite reassured by, is that there is a strong focus on the economy. In fact, I think Mr. Heng devoted the bulk of his speech in terms of time and substance of comments on the economy. I think that is, I mean, personally as a citizen and as a worker, I find that refocus back on the need to transform our economy, to bring our workers and our companies forward, very reassuring. And on this, I was quite glad to see that Mr. Heng wants to streamline many of the existing schemes and work everything to be a lot more enterprise centric. Yeah. And so there's clearly many plans and programs out there. I would have liked to see a little bit less listing of programs. There was a sense of accounting for what the budget is going to be spent on, and I would have liked to see a lot more inspiring in terms of Mr. Heng sharing with Singaporeans what his team's vision for Singapore is, how to bring the whole country forward. I thought that bit was, could have been done a bit better.
Ravi, I understand that, of course, for you, you're looking at things in a bigger picture, broader perspective, placing Singapore in the region as well as the world. What stood out for you for the budget this year?
Well, it is a very broad tour de force of the global environment and the local environment. When Mr. Heng Swee Keat was the MD of the Monetary Authority, which is our central bank, a decade ago, I wrote once that he is both the watchdog and the watchtower for the local economy. But as finance minister, he has an added role. He's also a nurturer of business. He's, in a sense, is a gardener. He's got a gardening role, which he's, I think, in all these three areas, I think he's executed himself fairly well in this budget. But from the watchtower perspective, I think I picked up 3 signals from him, and I'd call them the 3 tsunamis. And the first tsunami is the global storm that's sweeping around us. I mean, there's the geopolitical tensions, there's the anti-globalization fervor that's picking up, and the technological changes, automation, roboticization, artificial intelligence, and all that. That's the big picture. That's the first storm, the first tsunami. The second tsunami, and he discusses this at great length in the budget, is the silver tsunami, the aging tsunami. Now, I mean, I don't know if you remember, some years ago there was this Japanese minister who told the old people, hey, please hurry up and die. Mr. Heng hasn't done any of that. In fact, he's found value in these old people. And he's found ways to put them to good use and give them a worthy and purposeful life. As you said, we are living till the age of 84 these days. That's the average life expectancy. And I think he's laid out a roadmap for these people to be used. It's no longer seen as a demographic curse, but active aging, useful aging. I think he's done a very good job of that. And the third tsunami is the physical tsunami. And this is climate change. And I think if you see the last part of his budget statement, I think he's flagged issues. We are entering a carbon tax regime this year. and he's set up the ground to meet these challenges, including building dikes, and I think he mentioned the latest terminal T5, and the runway being elevated and all that. So I think these are three broad signals, and I think they're very good.
They're very good. Salma, understand for yourself, you belong to a special generation that's going to be the Merdeka generation, exactly, and you're going to be receiving some sweeteners, as it were. For you, what stood out for you for the budget this year?
You know, Haryanto, I thought the Merdeka generation was far more generous than I had actually anticipated. The Prime Minister already said it's going to be less than the PGs. So I looked at what the PGs had. If they go to a polyclinic or they go to a specialist outpatient clinic in a hospital and they get already subsidized rates, PGs get an additional 50% discount. Merdeka generation will get half that, 25%. So, things like that. PGs get MediSave top-ups of 200 to 800. Merdeka generation will get 200 a year, but for 5 years, which is again fair because PGs are older, they won't live as long. So for them, the top-up is for life. You can't do that for the Merdeka generation because people in their 60s now can expect to live at least 20, maybe even 30 years longer. So you can't give that for life. So 5 years is fair. Now, where the generous part comes in is the additional 1,500. Minister Hing has said will be given to Merdeka generation people who decide to take on CareShield Life. Now this is a new scheme that's only starting next year and for older people in 2021. It will provide anyone who's disabled, who has got difficulties with daily activities like eating, bathing, etc., with at least $600 a month for the rest of their life. Right. For younger people, it's compulsory. For older people, it's not. So, for example, I'm of the Merdeka generation. I'm with ElderShield Life. I'm with ElderShield, but ElderShield doesn't provide the same amount. They only give you 300 or 400 for 5 to 6 years. To shift over to CareShield Life, I'll have to top it up by, I calculated roughly $10,000 more. Right. So earlier on, the government has said they'll help us with a participation incentive of 2,500. So that leaves me about 7,500. Now an additional 1,500. So that brings my additional contribution to 6,000, which makes the whole thing a lot more attractive for me to want to go on. Then aside from that, well, most of the Merdeka generation stuff is on health, right? So MediShield premium top-ups, CareShield Life, etc. And then there's the $100 that they're giving and the passion zone. It may not be a lot. But I do appreciate that gesture. It goes into your PA, the Passion Silver card. You can use it for transport, for sports, etc., etc. So yes.
Ravi.
No. I just to clarify for the benefit of the non-Singaporeans listening to Salma, when she meant when you said PG, you mean the pioneer generation,
Pioneer generation,
not postgraduate. It says
postgraduate, pioneer generation. Okay, Wei Hong, a lot of people have been asking online as well, and Salma also mentioned a lot of give outs, and it's more generous. There are a lot of sweeteners. So the question is, do you think it is an election budget?
And I think for many people that will be the top question in the mind. And of course, the background is that a general election it may be held. Some people expect it to be held this year, but it actually need not be held until I think it's April 2021. Yeah, that's right. So my own view, I think the giveaways are across the board quite good, quite deep for the lower income. The Merdeka package, as Salma says, is more generous than expected. Almost everybody gets something this year. There's a $1.1 billion bicentennial bonus package. If you're a taxpayer, you get a tax rebate, income tax rebate that is capped at $200. Not a lot, significantly lower than I think past years when it was 1,000 and even 2,000. If you look at the scale of giveaways, the $1.1 billion bicentennial package, I would say it pales in comparison to some previous like grow and share package that were given out in past election years. So I would say, is this an election budget? I say inconclusive.
Doesn't feel like how he wants to commit to that.
But I think Salma might have a different view.
Salma, do you have a different view? Or even Ravi as well,
the government has put aside $6.1 billion for the Merdeka package, right? And they expect the package to cost about $8 billion, which, I've been doing my maths, and it works out to an average of $16,000 per person. Because 500,000
reaches to almost half a million, right?
But Wei Hong, you mentioned the bicentennial package. Can I say I was a little bit disappointed with that? Right, it is a lot of money, but most of it is targeted at the lower income people. I've got no objections to giving money to the lower income people. In fact, I think that they should receive the bulk of budget giveaways. But bicentennial is something that all Singaporeans should celebrate, and I felt that skewing most of the giveaways to the lower income did not quite fit the term bicentennial. Package.
So you feel it should be for everybody?
It could be a lower amount. You could have hived off part of this 1.1 billion into helping the lower income people, but have something for everybody. Right now, I think if you are rich and not working, you don't get anything, but you're still Singaporean. So why aren't they getting anything? If you're working, you get the tax rebate.
Okay, I have a slightly different take on this. I must say that the whole bicentennial bonus was a very pleasant surprise to me, and the thought of getting $200 in income tax rebate, and not a bad thing. And I was quite surprised that even my age group, I'm 50 this year, I am now old enough to qualify for annual Medisave top-ups. In my case, of $100 per year for the next 5 years. I mean, I would say that this sounds very patriotic, very rah-rah, very whatever, but I really mean it. Being Singaporean is reward enough. You do not need a bicentennial bonus.
Ravi, any thoughts on?
No, I'm just a little upset with Mr. Heng that these benefits only flow to people who became citizens before 1996.
And this is with regard to the Merdeka package.
As a naturalized Singaporean who chose to be a Singaporean, it wasn't Singaporean by accident of birth. I thought I should have been treated equally with my colleagues.
You're referring to the Merdeka package?
That's right.
Yes. Right.
And for those of you, of course, who are watching us at home, we are coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom, and we have Salma, Ravi, and Wei Hong here with us to have a first look on Budget 2019. In fact, it's just been probably just half an hour ago that, almost half an hour ago that Minister Heng just ended his speech. And of course, if you have any questions at all, wherever you are watching, do drop in the comment section. I think we can take a question here. We have one question from, let's see, we have one from Kulvistan that says, those not working should be getting help then? None. Okay, wait, let me see what is his full question. Okay, I think it got cut off here.
But I mean, maybe we can just take on. I mean, based on what the viewer is asking. So, do people who are not working get anything in this budget? The answer actually is yes, because there's a whole range of measures. So, apart from the income tax rebate, if you are not working, if you belong to the Merdeka generation, you get a certain slate of subsidies, as Salma mentioned. And in addition,
there's also help for caregivers. We are looking after people. That's going up. I think they're going to give them $200, and you no longer need to have a foreign domestic worker to be entitled to that. Right. Actually,
and also, actually, if you are slightly lower, middle to lower income, you get a lot. For example, just one, you get up to $300 off in GST voucher. This is given out every year, and there's commitment that this will go. This will be up to $300. There are various Medisave top-ups. So it's actually quite a comprehensive package.
There's also help for the workforce. For the people who are older or who are lower income workforce, there's also help to help keep them in the workforce, which I thought was a very good thing.
Ravi, I just want to go back to you and touch on you talked about the 3 waves of tsunamis. And then you talk about, particularly the geopolitical, technological, the global storm, as it were, and of course, the budget also focused on security matters.
Right.
Maybe more on that.
Well, I think the budget has held the line on security spending. Now, interestingly, Singapore under securities, Singapore includes defense, homeland security. And diplomacy, and it's I think Minister described it as deterrence and diplomacy together. You see, the defense budget has gone up by, I think, how much was it? Almost $700 million. But he's held the line on the MFA budget and the Home Affairs budget. But he's also indicated that there won't be any shortage of funds in case the external environment deteriorates. And for the first time, he's named certain issues with neighbors, which is, I thought, quite interesting. So security is the #1 item for spending, and I found it interesting that while Singapore's always had a defense, science and technology agency, this time he's spoken about a home team science and technology agency, for which the details can be expected in the coming weeks, and I think that I found it very interesting, and it shows the changing security priorities and our threat perceptions, and internally, the threats that we need to tackle. So I think he's flagged several issues there which are quite interesting.
Could I just ask Ravi something on security? Isn't this the first time that the minister has indicated that 30% of the budget money is going to security? And what is that?
I think that's traditionally the #1 item on the Singapore budget has been security, and education has been, and that I think continues. But I think you should look at where the extra money expenditure has been sanctioned this time, and you'll see that education gets a big priority.
Education and health, I think both.
No, education is the #1, and interestingly, environment and water resources and defense get the same extra allocation. At least from my first reading of the budget, that's what I saw. I think that's fairly interesting, and that ties in with all the climate change and other things that Minister spoke about.
Yeah, but I was quite surprised at the 30% figure for security.
That's been generally the line. It's not gone up too much. It's put all this put together, including
internal
diplomacy. Including the MFA budget.
Actually, just to set that in context, the 30% on security and diplomacy compares with the 46% on social spending and about 23% on economic development.
And
so I'm just saying the bulk of it still goes to social spending, which in Singapore's context includes housing, of course.
Include housing, and we talk about a lot of spending being up and all that. Wei Hong, the question is then regarding fiscal sustainability. What do you think of the long-term sustainability in terms of all these handouts that have been mentioned by Minister earlier on in his speech?
Well, the government clearly is always very invested, very interested in making sure that we have a fiscally sound system. And I think in this budget, we see the coming into effect of something that was talked about last year. This is the reference to long-term borrowing for infrastructure project. So Mr. Heng has basically confirmed that the government will borrow to build Changi East. All the development projects around there likely to be billions or even tens of billions, and that they will use the government's reserves to guarantee the borrowing, to get better interest rates, better terms on borrowing. The shift is quite significant. Basically, if the project were financed by today's money, it means that we taxpayers, our generation, will be paying for it. But when the airport is up and running, maybe in 5 years, 10 years time, and there's revenue from the airport, then it will be future taxpayers that are benefiting from the revenues. So basically, by borrowing now, it means that in future, when the airport is up and running, that generation's taxpayers can use the revenue from that airport's operations to then pay off the borrowing cost. In that sense, it's much fairer for intergenerational equity. And I was saying that this budget actually lays out the major planks for a very sustainable policy. There's of course taxes. Taxes will remain one of the main sources of revenue. And on the tax front, Mr. Heng made it a point to explain that while long-term borrowing is okay for large capital development project, when it comes to recurrent social spending, we must not get into the habit of borrowing for today's social needs. So that's why he explains that Singapore needs to raise the GST from 7 to 9% in a couple of years time. But in addition to all these taxes, we are quite fortunate that we have an NIR, the net investment returns. And the component that NIR contributes to our budget has really grown tremendously. It's now about 16 billion. That's about 20% of the expenses of the budget. So that's quite big. So together, so basically taxes, NIR, and then long-term infrastructure borrowing. I think the stage is set for a fairly good, solid basis to plan our country's finances.
Once again, for those of you who are watching us, we are coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom, and certainly we are discussing the budget 2019. To have a first look, really, because Minister Heng just delivered his almost 3-hour speech telling us, planning the way moving forward in terms of economic, social spending for Singapore. And of course, earlier on, Wei Hong talked about fiscal sustainability. I just want to go back to you, Salma, because I know that you feel very strongly for health issues, social issues, and particularly we earlier on when we were discussing this as well, you brought up the tightening of the dependency ration ceiling, or DRC. A bit more on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the government wants to reduce the number of foreign workers in the services sector.
Yep.
And hospitals, nursing homes, daycare centers for the elderly all come under services.
Yep.
So right now they are allowed to have 40% of foreigners.
Yes.
In future, 35%. The trouble is these sectors are very manpower intensive, and in order to keep prices down, they do employ a lot of foreigners.
Yep.
Right. If that source of manpower is cut, and they have to employ Singaporeans, will that push up the cost of, say, daycare, senior care activities, nursing homes? And if it does push up the cost is going to be passed over to the users, so therefore your seniors or their caregivers. In which case, I worry that the money that the government is giving, the additional subsidies, etc., might not be enough to offset and any increases. In which case, these people will be actually worse off than they are today. Having said which, Haryanto, can I also say that giving people money to help as they get older is good. But more important than that is to provide the services that they will need. Right? If you give me the money, but I can't buy the services I need. For example, older people might need daycare. So that the family members can go to work and the senior can go to daycare and they know that they're well looked after. Similarly, things like Meals on Wheels for those who can't go out, home nursing, etc. Now, all this exists in Singapore. Unfortunately, it's not uniform throughout. So there are certain parts of Singapore that can get some things and other parts that can get other things.
So issue of accessibility.
The accessibility is not there, and it's not as widespread as I would like to see it to be.
Ravi, any thoughts on that?
Well, I always wondered when it comes to the DRC, the dependency ratio ceiling. Should government really be prescribing to individual industries and on the labor front, and how much foreign labor they should hire or not hire, and leave that as a business decision? I mean, if the COE system has worked so well for cars, why don't you just announce quotas for construction industry, your healthcare industry, or the F&B industry, and leave it to the businesses to decide whether they want to bid for it.
Leave it to the businesses to bid for it?
Bid for it, and let it be a business decision.
No, but Ravi, then it will push costs up. In healthcare, your elder care, the people there are not paid that much.
No, give it a higher quota for the elder care people. I mean, for that, just like for the construction, for the shipping industry, if you can.
Can I just say that overall, I do agree that it is good to tighten the.
I'm with you on
ratio.
That. I do think that we need to upskill, automate, and all that. But leave it to the businesses also to make up these things and give them a quota. Let them work with it.
Wei Hong, any thoughts on that?
No, not really. I don't think Ravi was entirely serious in suggesting a COE system for foreign workers across different sectors. I mean, the question of how are you going to implement it, how are you going to come up with the numbers is just mind-boggling.
And of course, before we move along, also, right? Any final thoughts, on the budget this year, with whatever that minister has said?
Yes. One small thing that I really like, very itsy-bitsy, but it was just this move, this promise by the government that they would match dollar for dollar the donations that are given to IPCs and charities, institutions of public character and charities this year. I just think that's a small but very nice gesture to emphasize that in this bicentennial year, the spirit of community giving should be something that matters. So I hope people step up to it, and that we give so much that we max out the government's commitment on this, and that the charities will be overflowing with funds this year.
Ravi, what about yourself?
Well, I had a couple of surprises coming at me from Mr. Heng's speech. And one of them was the success of the startup ecosystem. I mean, it was just astonishing to hear that how much it has grown in these last few years. From 220, last year we had deals totaling $4.2 billion in that space. And it was just 136 million 6 years ago. And to know that 150 global venture capital funds, startup accelerators are now operating in Singapore is, I think, a remarkable testament for where we got. And I think the MAS has done a wonderful job in creating the environment for that. And the second thing that hit me in the face was the productivity increases. To discover, to learn that productivity has been rising at 3.6% per year over these last few years is, I think, quite remarkable. And it did strike me, it made me wonder, I'm sure the explanations will be there, why hasn't GDP been matching that productivity? But there must be adequate explanations for that. But still, it's a very remarkable number, and I think it's I think it's a matter for congratulating the people who put in place the policies to make that happen.
Right. Salma, what about yourself?
Just ask Ravi, why were you surprised by the productivity increase? Aren't all these efforts, tightening, increasing tech, getting them to mechanize, etc., to increase productivity, don't you expect that to come about?
I think if you read our paper recently, we said that we are working less, right, in terms of number of man hours per year and all that. So to get a productivity increase when you're working less hours, I think it's a very, very good thing. I think it's good for Singapore.
I mean, of course, it comes against the context of productivity growth that has been around 1% and even negative in some years. So compared to all that 3, it's like amazing.
So it's accelerated in
it's a sudden bump. I'm sure we'll be doing a lot of follow-up stories on why that's the case.
Salma, what about yourself? Final thoughts on Budget 2019?
Well, I like the fact that it was very forward-looking. Right, they're planning for many, many years ahead. Not just years, probably decades as well, like the seawater rising, etc. And we need that if Singapore wants to continue to thrive. But the budget also has enough immediate goodies to keep a lot of people happy. So it's got both the long-term plan and the short-term rewards.
Okay, on a final note from me, we talked about this earlier on. If there is one word that you could describe Budget 2019, what would it be?
And I think our answer to you is that journalists are incapable of one-word reply.
or one word or one phrase.
Or one phrase, So for me, maybe it would be a left hand and a right hand. I mean, on the one hand, giving out many things, many goodies, but on the other hand, also locking up a lot of money into a long-term fund. So I would say quite fiscally prudent.
Fiscally prudent, okay. Ravi?
Well, I'm for short headlines, so I'll just call it. Pretty much like the man himself, I'd say it's cerebral and very agreeable.
Very agreeable. Okay, what about yourself, Salma?
Well, I think it's generous, but balanced.
But balanced. All right. So there we have it. We have, of course, 3 of our colleagues right here, Muih Hong, Ravi, as well as Salma, to give us a first look on Budget 2019. Of course, earlier on, Minister Heng has already delivered the budget speech. And of course, it was almost 3 hours with a lot of announcements being made. And certainly, for more news and videos on the budget, continue to head over to straitstimes.com. We have a comprehensive follow-up right there. Once again, thank you, Salma and Ravi and Muih Hong for being with us today right here and with sharing a bit more, of what you think Budget 2019 is and, your take on Budget 2019. Once again, for those of you who are watching us, thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Adianto, for making it so fun.
Thank you.